This is the Chattanooga most people are used to seeing, a bustling city that almost never sleeps. But there's another Chattanooga, one we don't see because it's well below ground. A dark city that time forgot, a city where the only life you find is roaches, rats, and mold. And according to stories from frightened public works employees whose job takes them underground, something else thrives down here: ghosts.
And they've told us that there have been the kind of ghosts down there that you don't want to encounter, the kind that you might hear about from horror movies.
Ghost expert Hope Holloway says the ghosts down here are known to cause trouble.
They can get into your head and make you lost or confused.
The origins of Chattanooga's underground ghosts are said to date back to March of 1867, when 4 days of non-stop rain caused the Tennessee River to crest 28 feet above flood stage, leaving downtown Chattanooga underwater. Residents who could retreat to higher ground survived. Others drowned. The city suffered more devastating floods in 1875, 1886, and 1917. Holloway believes the underground ghosts are the result of those deadly floods.
I mean, anytime you have an amount of deaths, you tend to have some supernatural activity associated with it.
You know, I just noticed something that I did very much unintentionally. You see, throughout this entire haunt season series, just about every video has been in a cemetery. I'm not sure if you all noticed that. I just noticed that while I was looking through some of my videos earlier on today. But anyway, you guys, that leads us to another cemetery. And today we are in the Greenwood Cemetery. You see, the Greenwood Cemetery is located in beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is about 25 minutes west of Cleveland. But today, guys, I figure we would cover a few ghost stories here in the Chattanooga area. But the most prominent one I wanted to start out first in this video is really, it's not so much associated with the Greenwood Cemetery on where this happened, but it was a murder that took place turn of the century, early 1900s, around 1890. And well, actually, you know what, there is a bit of a connection to the Greenwood Cemetery. You see, right across the way from the cemetery is a pond, and this pond is associated with that murder that happened at the turn of the century. So anyway, guys, we're gonna go out to this lake and we're gonna talk about the wheelchair murder of a man who was a rider, a wannabe rider, and a woman who had become paralyzed from the legs down. So you guys, let's start this video. Let's do it. To another haunt season vlog. Now, right across the street from the Greenwood Cemetery is a beautiful old church. This church right here. And anyway, beside the church is this pond. Now, the story goes, turn of the century, 1890s, early 1900s, there was a big, beautiful house that is said to have sat right where the sign is right there. And this house was owned by a very prominent family here in the Chattanooga area. But to really get into the heart of this story, it starts with a young woman And she meets a man here in the Chattanooga area. He wants to be a writer. He's working on his book. She falls in love with him. Anyway, this love blossoms quickly. It grows. He continues to work on his book. And now these young lovers, they play amongst a very young Greenwood cemetery. At the time, the Greenwood Cemetery is a very park-like atmosphere. They had run amongst the graves. Kind of a different time in the Victorian era, and it looks like it has started to rain, which only adds to the atmosphere. And this young couple, they would also play around this lake bed right here, or pond, whichever you would want to call it. And soon this young married couple finds out that they are pregnant. They are overjoyed. They're happy to know that they are expecting. So 9 months arrives. The woman, she is on the birthing table, and sadly the baby is stillborn. The baby does not survive. And at this time, the doctors, they do a very risque procedure, and it causes this woman to be paralyzed from the waist down. Now the doctors, they believe that this paralysis is only temporary, or at least they believe. And so the man and his wife, they hang out around this house waiting for her to recover. Now this man, he does his job dutifully. Dutifully, I believe the word would be. He waits for his beautiful, loving bride to recover so they can walk around this lake and play in the nearby Greenwood Cemetery like old times. However, each month progresses, each month goes by, and he notices that his bride is not getting any better. In fact, his wife, her condition seems to only be worsening. So after months and months of waiting for her to get better, this man, who she fell in love with, he begins to have affairs. He begins to have mistresses. These ladies of the evening, if you will. Until finally, his lover, his wife, begins to notice that some things are not as they should be. Now this man, he has found himself a new lover, but knowing that he is married, and during these times it is greatly frowned upon if you are found out to be in a divorce. So this man, he decides to take his lover, his wife, on a little journey, if you will. He takes her in her wheelchair. They come down by this lake right here just to admire the beauty. But something happens. He pushes her as she sits in her wheelchair into this lake, this pond, and she drowns. Now this woman, she will fight for her life, and sadly she will drown in the lake because she cannot move from the waist down. So the man waits. He then calls law enforcement, the law enforcement of the time, and they pull her up from this pond. Now this man's story to the authorities is that he went back to the house to get something, and when he was back at the house to get something, her wheelchair by accident moved into this pond, and sadly he could not get to her in time, and she of course drowned. Now this story is what took place. This is what the authorities heard. And some people who heard this man's plight, they considered him to be a hero. And so In her will, he sees that he is given this house that is right between the Greenwood Cemetery and this lake. So this man soon marries again a woman that he met at one of these bars in the Chattanooga area, and they move into this house. But as karma tends to bring things up, he soon realizes that this woman that he is married to is much more different than the woman he murdered. This woman, she was a whore, she was a drinker, she would prostitute herself, and she would bring in these men, these mysterious strange men at all hours of the night in this house that this man's first wife had willed off to him. And it is at this time that one of these strange men threatens this man with his life, so much so that he chases him out of the house that his wife willed to him. He gets on a boat, goes into the nearby Tennessee River, and mysteriously the boat is found the next day, but the man isn't. You see, the boat is capsized and he has disappeared. Now later on, this big giant mansion will burn. And it is said that this man's spirit has been known to canoe across the Tennessee River in a certain area. And in this area, it is said that people have seen the spirit of a woman, the apparition of a woman in a wheelchair. And it is said by many that there is a certain spot at the pond where wheelchair marks have known to appear seemingly from nowhere. And I believe I have found this location here along the lake. I believe that it had to have been right here. It's very flat. It seems like it would be very perfect for a picnic, or for seemingly a wheelchair to move accidentally with a woman in it, a paraplegic, to their watery grave. Now to me that makes good sense, because this seems like a pretty interesting pond bed. So just imagine, I figured today we would try to find some wheelchair marks. Now, I tried doing my research online to see if there were proper names to this man and this woman in this story. However, I can't really find the name on the couple or the woman that was the second wife who led this man to his doom. So in the comments below, let me know if you all know those names. I'd really like to know. Now, aside from the haunted lake story, which I'm not entirely sure all true or not, I think it's more of an urban legend, our next story here in the Chattanooga area brings us to the Walnut Street Bridge. Now for a little history on the Walnut Street Bridge. The Walnut Street Bridge was constructed in 1890 and spans about 2,300 feet from one side of Chattanooga to the other side of the river on the other side of Chattanooga. And some time ago, I'd probably say maybe about 60, 70 years ago, it was talked about by the city as if they wanted to tear this bridge down or not. But as you all can tell, they turned it into a pedestrian bridge. It is the longest pedestrian bridge in the entire world. I don't really think that has changed all that much. But let's talk about the ghost story associated with this bridge. It was in March of 1906, and let's just say that relations between African Americans and white people, Caucasian Americans, were not so good. You see, there was a man named Ed Johnson who had been accused of raping a woman named Nevada Johnson. You see, this case got so bad that even the Supreme Court tried to intervene, trying to cancel out the death penalty that Ed Johnson had received wrongfully. And let's just say that did not sit well with the city of Chattanooga. You see, they broke Ed Johnson out of jail and they hung him from here at the Walnut Street Bridge, which is this beam right here. This is where Ed Johnson was wrongfully lynched. But it did cause a major stir in the United States government. Theodore Roosevelt even got involved as well. But they say after the lynching occurred, many people have said that they have seen the body of a man hanging from this spot right here. Or some people have seen a man walking this bridge at night only to disappear right in front of them. And now actually there have been 2 lynchings from this bridge right here, which at the time it was a very, very bad time in the United States history. And did you all know that over 2,000 people attended Ed Johnson's funeral? It was a pretty bad thing that happened here in the city. But now let's go to the remains, or I should say where the ruins of the Swain jail still stands to this day. Here, right in front of you, is where the old Swain's jail used to stand. Yeah, there's not really a whole lot here, except it is a parking lot. Yes, this is where I believe where Ed Johnson was pulled out of jail and hung from the Walnut Street Bridge. Mainly because why I say that is this jail was the closest to the bridge, and it is the oldest structure, or at least that's from what I can gather. But the Swain's jail was a very horrible place. You see, during the Civil War, it was used as a prison, mainly a POW prison. You see, this is where Union soldiers, or I should say, this is where Confederate soldiers would take in Union soldiers, and this is where they would torture them, this is where they would beat them, this is where they would hang them in the trees nearby. It was not a good place to be back then. But prior to that being here, it was also a jail for runaway slaves. You see, prior to the Civil War, this is where if you had a slave who had run away trying to reach north to a free state, this is where you would be captured, and this is where you would be dropped in a giant hole beneath a house that would be about 13 foot by 13 foot. And this is where you would be until your plantation owner or somebody were to get to you. Now, an interesting piece about Swain's jail is that Andrew's raiders were actually kept here after the general possession. You know, these men from the north, they took control of a Confederate train. They took it all the way up to about Ringgold, Georgia, where the valve blew on it, and they all ran for the hills. However, they were all captured, and Swain's jail is where they were taken, where the Confederate government would decide their fate. And we all know that they were hung. But let's talk about the ghost stories associated with this parking lot. Now, right now, it is a private parking lot owned by Unum, if y'all want to know. And it is said that people, while getting in their cars late in the evening when they're about to head on their way home, they will see someone in the back of their car with them. Now, some people have said that these apparitions, they look to be of Confederate clothing or even Union clothing. Some of them looking at them with a dead stare. Some people have seen Union or Confederate soldiers walking in this parking lot, and they will disappear out of thin air. And it is even said that people have heard disembodied screams in this parking lot. So if you think about it, the land is very much cursed in this area. And well, it is a parking lot right now, but rather scary. This was definitely an interesting haunt season video. I really didn't intend on making it like this. Actually, I was planning on doing a house near my hometown, but the people who had the house, they never got back to me, so I couldn't really do anything with that. Well, anyway. But anyway, guys, remember, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Always means a lot. Goes to show that y'all care, and that y'all want to see more awesome videos. So without further ado, guys, this vlog is over.